The double-dip recession has begun. Friday's news on GDP shows the double dip has arrived, an expansion of only 1.3%, and consumer spending up 0.1% in the second quarter, astonishingly low by any account. The debt ceiling trouble and lack of a longer-term resolution to the deficit will make it worse. The United States has entered a second recession. It may not be as bad as the first. Economists say that the Great Recession began in December 2007 and lasted until July 2009. That may be the way that the economy was seen through the eyes of experts, but many Americans do not believe that the 2008 to 2009 downturn ever ended. A Gallup poll released in April found that 29% of those questioned thought the economy was in a depression, and 26% said that the original recession had persisted into 2011. Is it really any wonder that many Americans believe that the economic downturn is still in progress? Home prices have fallen to 2002 levels. Values have dropped nearly 50% in parts of Florida, California, Nevada, and Arizona. Property values are also down that much in parts of troubled big cities like Detroit. Estimates are that as many as 11 million homes have underwater mortgages. Banks have inventories of as many as 2 million foreclosed homes which have not been released to the market. Home prices could easily fall another 10% if current trends persist. Perhaps the most powerful argument that the recession never ended, or that a new one has begun, is the persistence of unemployment. At least 14 million people are out of work. A third of those have been jobless for more than a year. May employment data showed the jobless rate rose unexpectedly and that the economy added only 58,000 jobs. Experts believe that the unemployment rate will not improve significantly until the monthly gain in jobs is consistently 300,000 jobs or more. There are a number of signs that a recession is firmly in place again, and that the downturn could last for several quarters, if not years. Most are already easy for the average American to see. Inflation. There is almost nothing that damages consumer confidence as badly as a rapid rise in prices. Starbucks recently increased the price of a bag of coffee by 17% because wholesale prices have risen by almost twice that rate in the last year. Cotton prices nearly doubled in 2010, but have fallen this year. But clothing is made months in advance of when they reach store shelves. Summer clothing prices are up as much as 20%. That may change in the fall, but for the time being, the consumer's ability to buy even the most basic clothing has been undermined. Consumers today pay more for sugar, meat, and corn-based products as well. Investments have begun to yield less. Part of the supposed recovery was driven by the stock market surge, which began when the DJIA bottomed below 7,000 in March 2009. The index has risen above 12,000, and the prices of many stocks have doubled from their lows. As a result, American household nest eggs that were decimated by the collapse of the market have rebounded slightly and enabled people to splurge on themselves. However, the market has stumbled in the last quarter. The DJIA is up only 1% during the last 3 months, and the S&P 500 is down. Americans, though, have few other places to put their money. 10-year treasuries yield about 3%. Gold was a good investment over the last year, but it has a lot of volatility. The market may not be a friend to investors for quite some time. The auto industry has staged an impressive comeback, although its profitability is based as much on the layoffs it has made over the last 5 years as generating new sales. General Motors and Chrysler have emerged from bankruptcy. Year-over-year monthly sales improved late last year and through April. May sales stalled. General Motors revenue dropped by 1% compared to May of 2010. Ford's sales were down about as much. There are many reasons for this trend, including higher gas prices and the constrained manufacturing capacity of the Japanese automakers because of a massive earthquake. Consumers also may be deferring big purchases because they are worried about their economic prospects. Slow car sales are not just a sign of lagging consumer confidence. They also may be a harbinger of tougher times ahead. These companies shed at least several 100,000 jobs before and during the last recession. Car firms have only just begun to hire again, but that trend will die with a plateau in sales. Oil prices are supposed to drop as the economy slows, as they did in 2008 and early 2009 when crude fell from over $140 to under $50. That drop at least allowed consumers and businesses like airlines to more easily afford fuel. Recently, though, crude has moved back and forth, staying somewhere around $100 a barrel, and appears to be stuck there, regardless of the economic situation. But there is also much more going on here. And American budgets have been hurt by the rising cost of gas. Americans of more modest means have been particularly affected. A slowdown in driving usually also leads to a decline in the retail sector as consumers reduce unnecessary travel to stores. The impact on other businesses is just as great. Airlines suffer, and so do firms which rely on petrochemicals. OPEC, for now, has signaled it will not increase production. The federal budget deficit has decimated any chance for another economic stimulus package, which many prominent economists say is essential to create a full recovery. A recent UBS investment research analysis predicted that state and local governments will cut at least 450,000 jobs this year and next, and that process is already well underway. States like California and New York currently run massive deficits, and the rates they must pay on bonds has risen accordingly. Newspaper headlines almost daily report on battles between state unions and governors over employment and benefits. China's economy slows. A slowdown in the Chinese economy is usually seen as the cause of global commodity price inflation, but the effects cut two ways. China's appetite for energy and raw materials may fall, but the demand for goods and services by its very large and growing middle class drops as well. Chinese purchaser manufacturing and export numbers have fallen as the central government has tightened the ability to borrow money. U.S. exports to China are key to the health of many American businesses. Without vibrant consumer spending in China, American companies will suffer. Unemployment creates two immediate problems. People without jobs drastically curtail their spending, which will ultimately affect GDP growth. The second is the need for tens and tens of billions of dollars every year in government aid to keep the unemployed from becoming destitute. That support has increased deficits, and the domino effect is that cash-strapped governments need to make more spending cuts. It may be the biggest challenge the economy faces. Unemployment has worsened because people over 65 continue to work because the values of their homes, which they once counted on as the financial basis of their retirements, have dropped so sharply. Older Americans also fear that cuts in Medicare and perhaps Social Security are inevitable, which increases the cost of their golden years. The jobs that older Americans have taken are often ones that younger Americans might have. The worst of the unemployment problem is the roughly 5 million Americans who have been unemployed for over a year. Their unemployment benefits have run out in many cases. The burden of their care falls to their families, friends, community organizations, and nonprofits. A family which has to support an unemployed person may be a family which cannot spend beyond its basic needs. To the extent that the federal or state governments can support the unemployed, the cost to run support programs increases. Debt ceiling. United States debt ceiling currently at $14.294 trillion and rising. It might seem that the economic and employment effects of the debt cap are the same as the deficit, but they are actually more insidious and longer term. The first byproduct of debt reduction, or at least a slowdown in its growth, is a combination of higher taxes and a lower level of government services. Higher taxes usually slow economic improvements, particularly when they are not coupled with stimulus measures. A number of economists have pointed out the expense reduction alone will not sharply improve the United States balance sheet. The increase in Medicare and Social Security's costs brought on by an aging population are also likely to trigger a need for higher taxes. Tax increases could keep the economic growth of the United States on hold for years. Access to credit. The lack of access to credit has hurt the economic activity of both individuals and small businesses. Housing. Housing is considered by many economists to be the single largest drag on the American economy, and the housing market has gotten much worse in the last 2 months. A report from the New York Federal Reserve published early this year said, when home prices began to fall in 2007, owners' equity and household real estate began to fall rapidly from almost $13.5 trillion in the first quarter of 2006 to a little under $5.3 trillion in the first quarter of 2009, a decline in total home equity of over 60%. Real estate research firm Zillow reported on more recent developments. Negative equity in the first quarter reached new highs, with 28.4% of all single-family homes with mortgages underwater, from 27% in Q4. Many homeowners who want to sell their homes cannot do so because they cannot afford to pay their banks at closing. Whether for good or bad, the American home was the primary source for money used for retirements, college educations, and the purchases of many expensive items such as vehicles and so forth. This too is another sign of the times and another physical manifestation of the book of Revelation. Everything that must change quickly or rapidly, and for the better, because it's about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations. Revelation chapter 15. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. 2. And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. 3. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are thy ways, thou King of saints. 4. Who shall not fear thee, O Lord, and glorify thy name? For thou only art holy, for all nations shall come and worship before thee, for thy judgments are made manifest. Everything is connected, and everything is numbered. The 4th angel is sounding. The United States of America is in a lot of trouble, morally, spiritually, economically, and has sinned against the Lord. Revelation chapter 17, verse 15. And he said unto me, the waters which thou saw, where the whore stands, are peoples, and multitudes, and nationalities, and languages. 16. And the 10 horns which thou saw upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. 17. For God has put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. 18. And the woman statue which thou saw is that great city which reigns over the kings and leaders of the earth. Yes, it's time for all prophecy to be fulfilled.